There are secrets buried so deep in history that when they finally surface, they don't just rewrite what we know, they shatter who we thought we were. In a locked archive beneath concrete and silence, a single document waited 70 years to speak, and what it revealed was not heroism, but calculated delay. This is not a story about war as you learned it in school. This is about the moments when those in power chose to watch instead of act. What you're about to discover will make you question every official timeline you've ever trusted. Every reassurance that someone was watching over us. The document exists. It's real. It's declassified now. And it proves that they knew everything. And they waited while the world burned. In 1942, deep within the intelligence networks of Allied command, information arrived that should have changed the course of everything immediately. Reports from resistance networks, from escaped prisoners, from witnesses who risked their lives to get messages across enemy lines into the hands of power. They spoke of trains moving through the night, of camps being built in remote forests, of smoke rising from chimneys that never stopped burning. The details were specific, the locations were exact, the numbers were growing daily, and every word was documented in careful typewritten lines. And those documents were received, stamped, filed, and then buried under classifications that would keep them hidden for more than 7 decades of silence. You might wonder how such a thing could happen. How information so urgent could be shelved while millions suffered in ways we can barely comprehend. But the answer is written in the margins of those declassified pages, in the handwritten notes that reveal priorities we wish we could deny today. Strategic considerations, they wrote. Operational complexities, resource allocation concerns, as if human lives were variables in an equation waiting for better timing. The first report arrived in July, detailing the expansion of detention facilities and the systematic nature of what was beginning to unfold across Europe. By September, intelligence officers had compiled evidence from 12 independent sources, all corroborating the same terrifying reality taking shape in the darkness. Photographs had been smuggled out, grainy and desperate, showing structures that could only serve one purpose, and still the information sat in locked cabinets. In November, a detailed memorandum outlined specific recommendations for immediate intervention, for targeted operations that could disrupt the machinery of genocide before it reached full capacity. That memorandum was marked as received, and then it disappeared into the bureaucratic void where urgent truths go to die in red tape. The men who read these documents went home to their families each night, kissed their children, and carried the weight of knowledge they were not authorized to act upon. Some of them kept personal diaries, later discovered, where they wrestled with what they knew and what they were ordered not to prioritize immediately. Then one officer wrote that he felt like a man watching a building burn from across a street, holding a fire hose, but waiting for permission to turn it on. If this story is stirring something in you, if you're beginning to realize how often truth is delayed for convenience, consider joining this community where we uncover what history tried to bury. The document that finally came to light in 2014 was declassified not through transparency, but through the persistent efforts of researchers who refused to stop asking questions. It was a 12-page intelligence summary marked Top Secret, dated December 4th, 1942. And it contained information that should have mobilized immediate action. The summary identified by name 3 major concentration camps that were already operational, including detailed descriptions of their purpose and the scale of operations underway. It estimated, with remarkable accuracy considering the sources, that hundreds of thousands had already been murdered and that the pace was accelerating with industrial efficiency. And at the bottom of page 7, in a handwritten annotation by a senior intelligence official, were the words that haunt anyone who reads them today. Received and filed for future strategic consideration when operational capacity permits more direct intervention in secondary theater concerns, the note read coldly. Secondary theater concerns, as if the systematic extermination of human beings was a footnote to more important military objectives somewhere else on the map. The implications of this language, of this prioritization, ripple through everything we tell ourselves about that war, and the heroes who fought in it. Because the heroes were real. The sacrifice was genuine. But the machinery of power that directed them was making calculations that valued some lives over others. This was not incompetence or lack of information. This was a choice, documented and deliberate, to delay action, despite having knowledge that could have saved countless lives. Railway lines that fed directly into the camps could have been bombed. Supply chains could have been disrupted. The infrastructure of genocide could have been targeted immediately. Military historians have since confirmed that the capability existed, that the intelligence was sufficient, that the operations were feasible within the existing strategic framework. What was missing was not ability, but will, not knowledge, but priority, not capacity, but the moral courage to act on information that demanded immediate response. The families who lost everyone, who were erased from existence in those camps, never knew that detailed reports of their fate were sitting in filing cabinets. They never knew that their desperate messages had reached the very people who could have intervened, who had the power but chose to exercise it elsewhere first. The liberation, when it finally came, was celebrated as a triumph of good over evil. And it was, but it came so much later than it needed to. The document reveals that liberation could have begun years earlier, that the timeline of rescue was not dictated by military necessity, but by strategic choice. This is not about assigning blame to individual soldiers or diminishing the genuine heroism of those who fought and died to end the Nazi regime finally. This is about understanding that systems of power operate on logics that sometimes prioritize abstract strategy over concrete human suffering in ways that should terrify us. Because if it happened then, with stakes that clear and evil that obvious, what decisions are being made right now in classified briefings around the world today? What documents are being stamped and filed and buried under national security classifications, while people suffer in ways that future generations will judge us for? The officer who wrote that handwritten note, marking urgent intelligence as secondary theater concerns, lived until 1987 without ever publicly acknowledging it. His obituary praised his distinguished service, his strategic mind, his contribution to Allied victory. And nowhere was there mention of the reports he filed away. He took that decision to his grave, and perhaps he justified it to himself as necessary pragmatism, as the hard choices that war demands from those in command. But the declassified document stands as evidence that pragmatism without moral courage is just another word for complicity dressed in the language of difficult decisions. We tell ourselves that we would have done better, that we would have acted immediately, that we would never have let strategic considerations override human urgency. But the document suggests otherwise. It suggests that when faced with information that demands action, institutional inertia and strategic calculation often prevail over moral imperative. The resistance fighters who died getting those reports across enemy lines believed their sacrifice would trigger immediate rescue operations, immediate intervention to stop the horror. They believed that once the Allies knew with certainty what was happening, the full weight of military power would turn toward ending it without delay. Instead, their reports became classified documents that would remain sealed long after everyone involved was dead, hidden from the very history they helped shape. The families of those resistance fighters spent decades not knowing that their loved ones had succeeded, that the information had reached its destination perfectly. What failed was not the courage of those who witnessed and reported. What failed was the courage of those who received the reports and chose to wait. This is the part of history that makes us uncomfortable because it complicates the narrative we prefer, the clean story of good triumphing over evil. It reveals that good sometimes triumphed slowly, reluctantly, after exhausting other priorities first, and that delay measured in months meant death measured in hundreds of thousands. The document has been available to researchers for a decade now, but it remains largely unknown outside academic circles because it contradicts the mythology we've built. We prefer to remember the war as a crusade against evil, where every possible action was taken immediately to stop atrocities the moment they were known. The reality documented in those declassified pages is more complex, more troubling, and ultimately more important for us to understand and confront honestly today. Because the bureaucrat who files away urgent reports still exists, the official who marks human suffering as secondary theater concerns is still making decisions in our name. The mechanisms that allowed calculated delay in the face of documented genocide have not been dismantled. They have simply moved to different buildings with different classifications. And we, the public, remain largely unaware of what information sits in classified files right now, what knowledge is being held back for strategic considerations. The 70-year delay between the document is creation and its release means that almost everyone who could have been held accountable died without facing questions. This is by design, not accident. The machinery of classification ensures that by the time truth emerges, justice is no longer possible. Only historical judgment remains. And historical judgment, as this document proves, is a soft penalty paid by people who are already gone, whose reputations can absorb criticism without consequence. The young intelligence analyst who first received those reports from the resistance networks was 26 years old, fresh from university, idealistic about defeating fascism. In his later writings, discovered in a private collection, he described the moment he realized his superiors were not going to act on the information immediately. He described the slow death of idealism, the accommodation to systems that prioritized other things, the way you learn to live with knowledge you cannot act upon. He wrote that he became a different person during those months. Someone who could read horror in the morning and attend strategy meetings in the afternoon. Someone who learned to separate what he knew from what he could say, what he felt from what he could recommend, within the boundaries of his authority. And perhaps that is the most disturbing revelation of all. Not that evil people made evil choices, but that ordinary people accommodated delay through bureaucratic rationalization. The document proves that the machinery of atrocity can continue not because no one knows, but because those who know are trapped in systems that delay action. It proves that information without authorization to act is just another form of silence, another way that truth gets buried under the weight of institutional priorities. 70 years is a long time to wait for the truth. Long enough for everyone directly responsible to escape earthly judgment. Long enough for it to feel like ancient history. But for the descendants of those who died while the reports sat filed away, 70 years is nothing. The pain is immediate, and the questions are urgent. Could my grandfather have been saved if they had acted when they knew, when the information was already sitting on desks in London and Washington waiting? These are not hypothetical questions. They are real questions asked by real people who live with absence shaped by decisions made in classified meetings long ago. The document offers no comfort, only confirmation that their suspicions were correct. That delay was chosen, that their family members were indeed secondary theater concerns. And now you know too. You know that history is not just what happened, but what was allowed to happen despite knowledge that could have prevented it. You know that the distance between knowing and acting can be measured in classified documents, bureaucratic procedures, strategic priorities that value some lives less than others. This is not comfortable knowledge. It sits heavy. It makes you question what else you've been told about how power operates and what decisions are being made now. But uncomfortable knowledge is still knowledge, and perhaps the only way we prevent future delays is by refusing to forget the delays of the past completely. The document exists. You can request it yourself. You can read those typed pages and those handwritten notes and feel the weight of what they represent. You can see for yourself the evidence of knowledge and delay, of information received and action postponed, of truth buried under classifications for 70 silent years. And then you have to decide what you do with that knowledge, whether you let it change how you think about power and accountability and the stories we tell. What documents do you think are sitting in classified archives right now, waiting 70 years to tell truths that someone has decided we're not ready to hear?